Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the most confusing situations in love aren't when someone doesn't want you. It's when they clearly do, but they don't act on it. You feel the connection. You see the sparks in their eyes. Their energy changes when you're around. And yet there's no consistent pursuit, no clear move forward. It's tempting to take that as a lack of interest, but the truth is often more complex. Desire and action are not always the same thing. Someone can want you deeply and still not chase you. Not because you're not worth it, but because something inside them is stopping them from closing the gap. For some, it's fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of stepping into something that could change them. The stronger the feelings, the bigger that fear can become. Because when you truly care about the outcome, the stakes feel higher. And when the stakes are high, hesitation often wins over action. For others, it's not fear of you, it's the weight of everything else in their life. Ambition, personal struggles, unresolved wounds from the past, these can all compete with the desire to chase. Sometimes they convince themselves it's not the right time, or they use distractions as a way to avoid dealing with how strongly they feel. Then there's the push-pull dynamic. He may step closer when he misses you, then step back when the emotions feel too intense. This isn't always a game. It's often a reflection of someone trying to manage feelings they can't fully control. They want the connection, but also want to feel safe. And when they're not sure they can have both, they retreat. The danger in all this is the confusion it creates for you. You start wondering if you should wait, if you should try harder, if you should make it easier for him. But here's the reality. Your worth doesn't depend on someone's ability to act on their desire. You deserve a love that doesn't just feel deeply, it moves toward you without hesitation. There are moments in relationships when you feel someone's interest in ways that don't require words. You catch the way they look at you, how their energy changes when you're near, the subtle signs in their tone, their body language, and even in the pauses between their sentences. Everything in those moments whispers that they want you. And yet, they're not moving toward you in the way you expect. They're not calling as often. They're not making big gestures, and they're certainly not chasing you. This can be one of the most confusing experiences because your mind tells you, if he wants me, he would pursue me. But human behavior isn't always that straightforward. The truth is, desire doesn't always translate into pursuit. People are not machines that turn attraction into action with perfect efficiency. Sometimes someone's feelings are there, but the readiness to act on them is not. This gap between what they feel and what they do can be caused by countless factors, emotional, situational, or even deeply subconscious. It's not always about a lack of wanting. Sometimes it's about their capacity to handle what wanting you means for their life. You have to remember that desire, especially deep desire, is powerful. It can bring joy, but it can also stir up fear, vulnerability, and uncertainty. When someone feels something intense for you, it's not just about attraction, it's about the potential for change. It could mean adjusting their priorities, opening themselves to being hurt, or challenging the life they've built. And for some people, those implications are enough to make them hold back, even when their heart is pulling them in. In these moments, the absence of a chase can feel like a rejection, but often it's more about self-protection than disinterest. Think about it. If someone knows that pursuing you would require them to step into emotional territory they've avoided for years, they might choose the safety of inaction. It's not that they don't want you, it's that wanting you would demand more of them than they feel prepared to give. Sometimes this holding back isn't even conscious. A person might not be sitting there thinking, I'm not going to chase her because I'm afraid. Instead, they might tell themselves stories. I'm too busy right now. It's not the right time. She probably wouldn't be interested in me like that. All of which serve as shields against the risk of going after what they want and possibly failing. It's easier to stand still than to face the possibility of rejection or disruption to their life. There's also the reality that wanting and chasing require different energy. Someone might love the idea of having you in their life, but resist the effort, commitment, or vulnerability it takes to pursue you actively. For some, this stems from past relationships where they gave too much and ended up hurt. For others, it's simply a lack of practice in putting themselves on the line emotionally. That reluctance doesn't erase their feelings, but it shapes their behavior in ways that can leave you wondering if those feelings are real at all. The tricky part is that from your perspective, desire without pursuit can feel indistinguishable from low interest. You might question whether you're imagining their signals or overestimating the connection. This uncertainty can push you to try to draw the truth out of them, to provoke action, to test their feelings, or to chase in their place. But doing so often shifts the balance of the relationship in a way that doesn't serve you. The more you chase, the more they're relieved of the pressure to act, and the less they have to face their own hesitations. It's important to recognize that their lack of pursuit is not necessarily a commentary on your value. You are not less worthy because someone doesn't act on their desire. People can want the most extraordinary things in life and still fail to go after them. Not because those things aren't worth it, but because they aren't ready to pay the emotional price of having them. That's as true for careers, dreams, and opportunities as it is for love. Understanding this dynamic frees you from making their behavior about your shortcomings. It allows you to see that wanting you and chasing you are two different things, and that the gap between them belongs to the other person, not to you. Your job is not to close that gap for them, but to stand in your truth, knowing that if they want you enough to step forward, they will. And if they don't, it doesn't mean you weren't worth chasing. It means they weren't in a place to rise to the level of what you deserve. Fear is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior, and in love, it often works in ways that aren't immediately visible. When someone feels deeply for you, it's not always a simple equation of, I like her, so I'll go after her. In fact, the stronger their feelings, the more likely it is that fear begins to creep in, fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, and fear of what might happen if they fully open themselves to you. This is why some people seem so much more confident and carefree when the connection is light, but when emotions deepen, they start to pull back or hesitate. It's not a lack of attraction, it's the overwhelming sense that pursuing you could put them in emotional territory they can't easily control. Vulnerability is uncomfortable because it means lowering the walls they've built to protect themselves. For many, those walls are there for good reason. Past heartbreak, betrayal, or experiences where opening up led to pain. They may have promised themselves that they'd never let anyone get that close again, even if that promise now conflicts with what they feel for you. This internal battle can paralyze them. On one hand, they're drawn to you. On the other, every instinct tells them to retreat before they get hurt. That push and pull isn't about playing games, it's about self-preservation colliding with desire. Rejection is another part of this fear. The deeper the feelings, the greater the potential loss if those feelings aren't reciprocated in the way they hope. If you're just a passing crush, the risk is small. But if you're someone they truly see as special, the thought of being turned down becomes unbearable. In their mind, chasing you and failing would not just sting, it would confirm their deepest insecurities. It's easier for them to keep their feelings hidden than to risk putting them on the line and being met with disappointment. This is why you may notice that some people seem bold and confident in dating until they meet someone who truly matters to them. Suddenly, their behavior changes. They overthink every interaction, become hyper, aware of their own flaws, and start second guessing their worth. Their fear doesn't stem from you doing anything wrong. It comes from the fact that you matter enough to unsettle them. When someone has the power to truly affect us, they also have the power to deeply wound us, and not everyone is willing to hand over that kind of power easily. Sometimes this fear isn't even conscious. They might genuinely believe they're just not ready, too busy, or that the timing isn't right, without realizing those are just convenient narratives masking a fear of getting too close. It's a subconscious protection mechanism. If they can convince themselves there's a logical reason not to chase, they never have to admit that what's really stopping them is emotional vulnerability. This fear can also create a strange paradox. On the surface, they may seem distant, guarded, or even indifferent, but underneath they're wrestling with feelings they don't know how to handle. They might give you moments of warmth, connection, and closeness, followed by periods of withdrawal. You feel the spark when they're present, and then you feel the absence when they retreat. This inconsistency is not always intentional. It's a reflection of the tension between wanting you and protecting themselves. From your perspective, it can be incredibly frustrating because their actions don't match their feelings. You might even start thinking it's your job to prove to them that it's safe to open up. But the truth is, you can't remove someone's fear for them. You can offer kindness, consistency, and understanding, but the decision to be vulnerable has to come from within. If they're going to overcome that fear, they need to decide that what they stand to gain is worth more than what they're afraid to lose. The most dangerous trap here is mistaking their fear for a sign that you need to chase them harder. That instinct often backfires. The more you try to close the gap their fear has created, the more they might retreat, because the pressure to face their vulnerability grows. Instead, your strength comes from maintaining your own boundaries and letting them choose to face their fear in their own time. If they do, it will be because they've decided you're worth the risk, not because you've carried them across that line for them. When someone doesn't chase you despite wanting you, one of the most common reasons is that their life is already overflowing with responsibilities, distractions, or personal struggles that consume their attention. This isn't always about you or about the depth of their feelings. It's about capacity. A person can genuinely feel drawn to you, but still be so wrapped up in their own circumstances that they can't give that desire the energy it deserves. Attraction may be the spark, but pursuit requires space, clarity, and emotional bandwidth, and not everyone has those available at the same time they meet someone who matters. Sometimes their life is filled with legitimate external demands, work pressures, family obligations, financial concerns, or health issues that dominate their focus. In these situations, even though they think about you, the mental and emotional energy required to actively pursue a relationship feels overwhelming. They may fear that they couldn't give you the time or consistency you deserve. So instead of stepping forward halfway, they pull back entirely. From your perspective, that absence may feel like disinterest, but for them, it's about not wanting to start something they can't sustain. For others, the distractions are less about urgent responsibilities and more about the way they prioritize their time. They might be caught up in hobbies, friendships, travel, or personal goals that occupy most of their mental space. It's not that you don't matter, it's that they're accustomed to a certain rhythm in life and aren't sure how to adjust it to fit a new emotional commitment. Pursuing you would require them to shift their priorities, and that's a choice they may not be ready to make, even if the desire is there. There's also the internal version of being too distracted, a state where someone is preoccupied not by external events, but by their own thoughts, doubts, and personal growth. They might be in a phase of self-discovery, trying to figure out who they are, what they want, or how to heal from past experiences. Pursuing you during that stage would mean dividing their emotional energy between you and the work they need to do on themselves, and for some, that feels like a recipe for failure. So they hold back, not because you're not worth it, but because they fear they'd show up as a lesser version of themselves. This can be even more complex when the distractions are emotional wounds they haven't yet addressed. Someone who's still processing a breakup, grieving a loss, or carrying unresolved trauma might find that their heart isn't ready to fully open. In their mind, chasing you while still dealing with those internal battles could be unfair to you because they wouldn't be able to offer the stability or depth you deserve. And so, they choose distance, not as a rejection of you, but as a way to avoid creating a connection they feel they can't nurture properly. The frustrating part for you is that from the outside, distractions can look like excuses. You might think, if they truly wanted me, they'd find the time, because you know that when you care about something, you make space for it. And while that's often true, it doesn't account for the reality that people have different capacities, comfort levels, and ways of managing their lives. What feels like a manageable stretch for you might feel like a breaking point for them. It's also worth remembering that distractions and busyness can sometimes serve as a shield. By staying consumed with work, routines, or other priorities, they avoid facing the vulnerability and uncertainty that come with pursuing someone deeply. In this way, their distractions become a form of emotional protection. They tell themselves they're too busy, when the truth is, they're hesitant to step into a space where their feelings could lead to real change or risk. In all of this, the key is understanding that their lack of pursuit isn't necessarily a reflection of your worth, but rather of where they are in their life and what they can realistically give. The challenge is not to interpret their inability to act as evidence that you're not desirable or important, but to recognize that timing, readiness, and capacity all play a role in whether desire turns into action. Someone can want you and still not be able, or willing, to rearrange their world to make that pursuit happen. And while that truth can be difficult to accept, it's also freeing because it reminds you that their behavior is about their circumstances, not about your value. Sometimes, the reason someone doesn't chase you, even when they want you, comes down to their core personality and the way they naturally approach relationships. Not everyone expresses attraction with grand gestures, constant pursuit, or verbal declarations. For some, their style of connection is more subtle, cautious,